He had never seen such a troublesome recruit before. The boy took the grenade, and before the instructor could even give the order, he directly pulled out the fuse. Due to excessive nervousness, the grenade fell straight to the ground. Everyone was instantly stunned. At the moment of life and death, the instructor was the first to rush out of the trench. Just 1 second before the grenade exploded, a boy threw himself onto it without hesitation. He slowly lifted his head, and then a living life disappeared, just like that. Everyone thought he was a hero who sacrificed himself to save others, but in reality, this boy had long lost the will to live. In 1942, Germany, in order to completely exterminate the Jews, Hitler specially established a youth military school as part of his genocide plan. Anyone who successfully graduated from this school would become an elite of the empire. However, entering this school was no easy feat, as the admission standards were extremely strict. To ensure the purity of the Aryan race, even minor flaws in appearance or hair color would lead to disqualification. This boy's name was Friedrich. His outstanding combat skills caught the eye of an officer. The officer then approached Friedrich, explained his intentions, and invited him to enroll in the youth military school to serve the Führer.
Das ist die Elite. Wirklich? Klar, dann nehmen Sie nur die allerbesten.
Naive and inexperienced, Friedrich felt as though he had been blessed by the goddess of fortune. Having grown up in material poverty, he had long vowed to make something of himself. This was an opportunity he could not miss. Excitedly, he ran home to announce the good news to his family. But to his surprise, his father refused outright, as he was a staunch anti-fascist.
Das ist die Chance. Da kann ich hinterher alles werden.
Auf keinen Fall.
Schon schlimm genug, was die in der HJ aus euch machen. Da gehst du mir nicht auch noch auf so eine Eliteschule. Du fängst in der Fabrik an. Wie abgemacht.
Unwilling to give up, Friedrich continued to plead with his father. In return, he received a resounding slap across the face. On the surface, his father agreed to his request, but in the dead of night, Friedrich quietly left home while his family was asleep, leaving behind only a letter. The next morning, when his father discovered he was gone, he was so furious that he swung a hammer and smashed Friedrich's bicycle into scrap metal. Soon, Friedrich arrived at the military school, carrying a forged signature from his father. Dressed in his uniform, he looked particularly spirited. Secretly glancing around to ensure no one was watching, he couldn't help but raise his right arm in a Nazi salute. At that moment, he felt as if he saw his own bright future ahead. But when he took out a photo of his family, his mood suddenly became heavy. His stubbornness would undoubtedly cause them great sorrow. However, the school's passionate atmosphere quickly swept away his feelings of guilt. The headmaster gathered all the new students in the auditorium and delivered an inspiring speech. All of you sitting here today will become the finest talents of the empire. Whether you are the children of farmers or industrialists, you will all receive equal training here. You are like uncut diamonds. With careful polishing, each of you will shine brilliantly. When victory arrives, you will become the greatest regional leaders, ruling London, Moscow, and Washington. History is made by men, and we train the men who make history.
Ein dreifaches Sieg! Heil! Sieg! Heil! Sieg! Heil!
The students were exhilarated, raising their arms and shouting with enthusiasm. Friedrich, too, was completely indoctrinated at that moment, officially beginning his life at the military school. As soon as he returned to the dormitory, the squad leader immediately put Friedrich in his place, not only messing up his clothes, but also demanding that he do 20 push-ups, despite having done nothing wrong. This left Friedrich confused. Clearly, this place was nothing like he had imagined. That evening, a new student arrived at the school, personally welcomed by the headmaster. His name was Albrecht, the son of a regional leader. But to everyone's surprise, he was not arrogant like other privileged children. Instead, he was kind and gentle, even helping Friedrich tidy his bed. The squad leader naturally dared not trouble him. The two helped each other, studied together, trained together, and even peeked at others bathing together. Their bond quickly grew, and they became best friends. However, an incident soon disrupted their lives. One day, the instructor discovered that a student had wet the bed the previous night. He publicly humiliated the boy, ordering him to carry out his mattress and strip off his pants to urinate in front of everyone. If he failed to urinate, the entire group would be punished. In the end, the boy shamefully forced out a few drops of urine. A few days later, he wet the bed again. Unfortunately, the squad leader caught him and used it as leverage to extort a large sum of hush money. The boy was desperate. He had no money at all. If the instructor found out, he would face the most humiliating punishment. Rather than endure such shame, he chose to end his life. During the next training session, the grenade fell to the ground. At the moment of crisis, everyone panicked. Yet the boy unhesitatingly threw himself onto the grenade, using his body to shield others from the explosion. No one expected that the boy who wet the bed would be the bravest when it mattered most. Afterward, the school held a grand funeral for him and awarded him an honorary medal. Only Friedrich understood that the boy had been driven to his death by oppression, but the training continued. During a physical training session, the instructor, eager to show off his abs, held his breath and asked Friedrich to punch him hard. Yet, despite waiting for a long time, Friedrich did not move.
Na los, man kann...
That punch should have been for the dead boy. A few days later, the school held a boxing match, and Friedrich saw this as an opportunity to prove himself. He quickly knocked his opponent to the ground, but to his surprise, the audience cheered and urged him to land another punch. Confused, he recalled what his instructor had once told him. At that moment, he raised his fist and sent his opponent straight to the hospital. The crowd erupted in cheers, and even the headmaster praised him. Only Albrecht remained expressionless. That day, Albrecht invited Friedrich to his father's birthday party. During the celebration, Albrecht recited a poem he had written for his father, but before he could finish, his father interrupted him. To him, the empire did not need poets. It needed warriors who could kill on the battlefield. Learning that his son's friend was a boxer, his father became interested and, under the pretense of celebration, forced them into a fight. In the blood-red basement, the two boys were compelled to beat each other. In the end, Friedrich won, and Albrecht left in defeat. He feared Friedrich would become his father, and he feared he would never be able to become his father. That night, they were suddenly awakened. Albrecht's father had come again, assigning them an urgent mission. A train transporting prisoners had derailed, and some had escaped into the forest. Their task was to capture them. Some were eager, while others were nervous. Soon, they spotted a few figures on the hillside and fired, without confirming their targets. To their horror, they realized they had shot children their own age. Albrecht rushed forward to bandage the wounded, and Friedrich was too shocked to react. At that moment, Albrecht's father arrived. He ordered his son to step aside and then drew his gun. Albrecht was yanked away. Bound by his father's authority, he dared not resist, but his inner kindness tormented him. He knew he had already become an accomplice to the devil. Meanwhile, the remaining prisoners were driven into a massive pit. Then, gunfire erupted, mingling with the screams of the dying echoing through the forest. Even at night, they could still hear the voices of the dead children. That night, no one could find peace. After all, it was the first time they had truly killed. The next day, the instructor assigned them an essay about German heroes. Albrecht had finally reached his breaking point. He wrote about the massacre that had taken place the night before and openly condemned his father. This act completely enraged his father. For the sake of his political career, he ordered Albrecht to rewrite the essay, denying what had happened. If he refused, he would be sent to the front lines. Even so, Albrecht stood his ground. Friedrich was furious. He couldn't understand why Albrecht was going against his father.
Entschuldigung, aber sonst hast du dabei an niemanden gedacht, oder? Hä? Sag doch mal was! Hä?
As they argued, Friedrich pushed Albrecht to the ground, but as they fought, they suddenly embraced, tears streaming down their faces. They were best friends, and this time, it was likely a final farewell. Then, an unexpected event changed their lives forever. The instructor ordered the students to strip naked and dive into an ice hole, grabbing onto a rope and swimming out from another opening. Despite shivering from the cold, the boys had no choice but to grit their teeth and endure. Friedrich made it out first. Seeing this, Albrecht jumped into the freezing water as well. But instead of swimming toward the exit, he simply gazed into the dark abyss of the lake. Albrecht chose to use his life to defy his father's authority, to exchange death for the purity of his soul and the peace of his conscience. When Friedrich realized that Albrecht hadn't surfaced, he panicked and desperately began digging through the snow. When he finally found him, he saw Albrecht had let go of the rope. Friedrich grabbed an axe and tried to break the ice, but the layer was too thick. It was useless. All they could do was press their hands together on either side of the ice. Albrecht gently shook his head. It was as if he had so much to say, but no words could come out. Friedrich could only watch helplessly as Albrecht sank into the depths of the lake. Albrecht's death left Friedrich devastated. Back in the dormitory, he teetered on the edge of madness. Perhaps at that moment, he finally understood why his father had tried so desperately to stop him from joining this school. This place did not create greatness. It only devoured people's souls. On the other side, Albrecht's father received the news of his son's death. His mother, overcome with grief,
Einfach zu schwach.
placed all the blame on Friedrich, believing he had led Albrecht astray. Yet the school did not immediately expel Friedrich. Instead, They gave him one last chance. If he won the upcoming boxing match, he could prove his worth and stay. Once again, fate had placed him at a crossroads. Friedrich knocked his opponent to the ground, but this time he seemed frozen in place. Looking at Albrecht's father in the audience, at the instructors consumed by ambition, he finally understood. Everyone here was a victim of this era, and the only thing he could do was follow Albrecht's path and resist this corrupt world in his own way. So, he let go. He stood there, allowing his opponent to strike him again and again. He lost the fight, but he had finally defeated himself. In the end, Friedrich was expelled from the school. That winter, the snow fell heavily. He turned to look back at the place that had once given him pride and honor. With Albrecht's death, he buried his past self here as well. He had arrived full of hope, and now he left full of hope, stepping forward into an unknown world. People cannot choose where they are born, but they have the right to reject war.